Just done it from nowhere.
Brought to you by Tab. For Sport on Tap, download the Tab app today. What are you really gambling with?
Great to have you in, Hodgie. And last week you called Brisbane's performance embarrassing. You would have been much more pleased about what they served up on Friday night.
Oh, clearly, you're not talking about the last 10 minutes there.
I was in bed. I was asleep. I didn't see it.
Their first three and a half quarters were excellent. To a lot of people having a go at them that they took Port Adelaide too easy, which clearly they did. And I think the reason why I said embarrassing, because it was down to the mental side of things. Like, they're a team that are a lot better than what they showed. Nothing off Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide were excellent, but the effort around the ball, the effort off the ball, working for one another was an area that they did not succeed in. But then you flip to, they played against a team on Friday night who, apart from in the final last year, has had the wood over Brisbane with big physical midfield. And I thought there was a few little tweaks early on, which a credit to the coaching staff. They took out Ashcroft, who started against Port Adelaide, and they put in a Jared Berry, a bigger body, to go with Dunkley and Neil, and it sort of set the tone for the rest of the players.
Was that the most ferocious you've seen Brisbane hit the ball around the stoppage? It is for me.
Yeah, I think early what we couldn't get over was the contested possession and the clearances that was going all Brisbane's way. And I know we've spoken, Gorn went down, but Grundy, they still were leading the hit-outs at quarter-time Melbourne, but they were getting smashed around the stoppages with contested possession and clearances. So I think it just goes to show that even though players can be as fit as they can, if they're mentally not switched on, then that can happen to them. And it was good that they were able to turn it around in front of a big crowd, because they were competing against both the new side, the Dolphins, and the Broncos, that had back-to-back games in Brisbane that night. Competing
against themselves in many respects, and I think they convinced themselves, though they should convince themselves, that they can compete at the top end. But they didn't get it right in the break, and for whatever reason, the AFL decided to keep the game going, and that was by the rules. But ultimately, it's Brisbane, it's Chris Fagan, it's the captains. It's their responsibility to turn up, play by the rules, and not nearly lose that game.
Yeah, well, I was almost out the door as well. I thought when the lights went out, I thought, here we go, game over, we're going home. But you're right, it goes back to that mental side of things. Melbourne came out early. I think there was a bit of confusion because Melbourne were getting told to go back into the rooms apparently, and Brisbane were being told they can't come out. So Melbourne had 4 or 5 minutes extra out on the ground. But you could see from the start, the intent of Melbourne, it was clear from their coaching staff that it was like, we're 40 points down, there's 12 minutes left on the clock, take the game on, let's try and make something of this. And on the flip side, I probably would have been in the same position. Make sure, don't take risks when you don't need to. Make sure you go long down the line, try and get stoppages. But it just shows that in football, if you try and be defensive too early, it just gives the opportunity for the opposition to take ground. And Melbourne, I think for the first 3 quarters, they had one aggressive kick up the middle, and that was a Brayshaw to Ben Brown, and ended up with a Fritsch goal. But for the other 3.5 quarters, you didn't see it. Straight after that break, their mindset was take the game on, and tell you what, it got pretty close there in the end.
It did. They're probably always going to be a minute or two short, but a couple of things they tried or have been trying. Been question marks on Cam Rayner. I thought he answered those questions on the weekend. He looked terrific across the half-back line.
Yeah, I'm probably one that would have preferred to see him play in the half-forward line because of the power and what he can do, but when you see a bloke who can take an intercept mark like that, and then there was 2 bits of play where it was exactly what Chris Fagan was trying to get. He burst through a pack on his left side and hit a nice little kick to the wing, and then in the last quarter hit up Charlie Cameron going through the corridor. I think that's what they're looking for. They've got Daniel Rich who can kick it a long way. They've got Coleman who can hit that touch, but Cam Rayner is that intercept marker who can use explosiveness to get out of a stoppage as well.
Hodgie, we'll get your in-depth thoughts very, very shortly. This is just a tease, but who were you most disappointed in of any team in round 2?
Port Adelaide and Horn Francis.
Okay, why?
No, I was wanting to discuss it with you, Kane. I thought attitude's a big thing, and I saw a chase and effort from this fella. I'm all for him, and I realise he's been too much under the pump. But I saw him give up on a chase on the weekend, which was the weekend before when things were going his way. He's going his way that I did not see it. So I wouldn't mind having a chat about what your thoughts were, considering is he running in front of the footy and when he needs to dig deep? Does that go back to having an ice bath and being disciplined off the footy field, which bring discipline on the footy field, Kane?
I love the fact that you've brought this up.
Saved by the outbreak too.
I'm so locked and loaded for a response. It is not even funny, but that's the sort of gold you get with Luke Hodge, who joins us each and every Monday. And if my Twitter timeline is anything to go by, on my mentions, a lot of people wanted to ask that exact question that Luke Hodge has just asked.
And Luke Hodge has just passed the ball to you.
He has.
You're running onto it. What say you about your adopted son?
Well, I'm about to go through my 7 observations of the round, and observation 1A is that was a cheap shot from Luke Hodge in relation to Jason Horne-Francis. And you're referencing his defensive action, and thank you to the 500 people that sent it to me on social media. I noted it. I ignored it. He's not a finished product. I don't know if I've ever said Jason Horne-Francis is going to come in and be one of the better players in the competition and have an immediate impact. I've said that in 4 years' time, look out for Jason Horne-Francis. And let me, because people forget, everyone's going to rave about Luke Davies-Uniacke. All right, this round, everyone's going to rave about it. How good is Luke Davies-Uniacke? And they're right. They're right, by the way.
10 out of 10 coaches vote.
10 out of 10, 21 clearances in 2 weeks, dominating through the midfield. What was Luke Davies-Uniacke like in his second year? Hopeless.
Was he questioned for his lack of defensive?
He was questioned for everything, and including to the point where he was left out of the side. This is his second year. Everyone's raving.
They've been patient.
Okay.
Yep.
So what was Dustin Martin's defensive action like now, let alone in his second year? Horrible. Have you ever seen Dustin Martin chase? No, you haven't. Now I'm not saying Jason Horne-Francis is going to be Dustin Martin, but I'm saying he could be Patrick Dangerfield. Go and watch Patrick Dangerfield's vision from behind the goals now, let alone in his second year. Woeful. What was Cam Rayner, the first pick in the draft, like in his second year?
Come in any time you'd like,
What
Hodgie.
was Ash
I'm
McGrath?
just laughing at Kane.
What was Andrew McGrath like in his second year? What's he like now? What was Matt Rao like? Take his first 3 games out of it. What was his form like in his second year? So just be patient. I've never said he's going to be the finished product. We saw last week the possibilities. It is exciting. But I'm not saying he's a game changer yet.
It's just good to have a break from the hashtag Icebath hashtag, to be honest with you, just for 1 week.
It'll come back. Yes,
I've just got to say something to Jason. That was nothing against you, mate. I know that it's going to take a long time to develop. I just want to see how hard Kane's going to defend you, and I got exactly what I wanted. So, Kane, I actually couldn't agree more. Second-year player coming with high expectations. He won't be his best football until year 4 or 5.
Couple of
and
texts
especially coming off a
Kane.
lack of injury as
You
well.
protest it too much. Move on.
So we agree. So in the end, after all that, Luke Hodge and I agree. Observation number 1. Someone in the media this week is going to say that Hawthorn won't win a game this year. So I want all of you here and our audience to keep an ear out for the media person that tips in to Hawthorn not winning a game this week. They will be wrong. They will be wrong. If anyone says Hawthorn won't win a game, they'll be wrong. They're not going to win many, but they won't go through winless this year. That is observation number 1. So I want you to keep an...
Hodgie, how many games will Hawthorn win this year, based on what you've seen?
I'd say 2. I've got them down winning this weekend.
Have you?
Yep.
Upset down in Tassie.
I just believe that they're a young team that have effort. If you saw the game that they play against Collingwood, Collingwood are a quality team.
Yes.
And at times they're going to sneak past some sides who don't rate them as much. And they're going to come off a disappointing game. North are coming off a high of a Fremantle trip. I think Hawthorn are good this weekend.
They've got some good young kids. Dylan Moore is an exciting product. There's no doubt. Newcombe works really hard about the ball, but they won't want to get injuries.
My only concern, Jared, is
injuries.
The damage that it does to their good players. We know that the young players it's going to hurt, but I saw a couple of really poor efforts from Jath yesterday, outmarked badly to the point where he wasn't
didn't have a good
competitive. And I mean, he was one player that you could bank on to be a really exciting offensively and defensively. And
what they did do well, they won the ball out of the centre comprehensively, so that's a start. That's something the Swans would need to address.
Observation number 2. I'm not falling in love with Essendon, but I thought Brad Scott had a great week. And a couple of examples of what he did. McGrath back. I mean, no-brainer, right? We've all known that he was a half-back. He's not a wingman. He's not a non-baller. He's certainly not a half-forward. And he played a terrific game. We mentioned it with Cornelio last week, and coaches actually believing in what your players can do. The same thing applies to Dylan Shield. Back on ball. He's not a high half-forward, Dylan Shield. He's an inside midfielder, and the guy can play. 27, 9 ground ball gets, 7 clearances, 4 tackles and 2 goals. That's the Dylan Shield they recruited.
Since he got dropped, he's been superb, Dylan Shield, and I don't think he's got enough recognition, so I'm glad you have recognised him, Kane. He celebrated his 200th last week. He started the season with 2 good games, another 2 good games.
And he's a pro as well. I mean, he's a good standard example setter for Dylan Shield. Hodgie?
What I liked about it is when in the third quarter when it looked like Gold Coast were going to get a run on, and normally they would have probably over the last 12, 18 months just let that go. They fought back, they dug deep and ended up coming out with an almost 30-point win. That's something that they've changed. Whether that's Scott's mindset brought in, playing blokes in a position that they feel more comfortable in. But that was clearly change that I noticed, that they dug deep. They didn't want to lose that game, and they fought as a group to win.
Langford forward 5 goals, great move from Brad Scott. And the decision not to play Stringer, a great decision. He was fit to play. Nah, you're not ready. I'm playing in the VFL. 3/4 he played in the VFL, reportedly played well. And I wouldn't pick him this week. I'd make him wait and I'd make him earn it. So Brad Scott had a terrific week as coach. Observation number 3, the losing coach in Saturday night's Showdown is in for a really tough week, Gerard. A really tough week.
Looking forward to the game. Adelaide have played some really good footy and come up with no wins. Port Adelaide's played one good one and one shocker.
Who have you got more faith in?
Probably Port Adelaide.
I'm the other way.
Yeah, well, Port Adelaide's best. Their first game against Brisbane, and it's hard to know what they beat. They beat Witches Hatch compared to the Brisbane we saw on the weekend. It was really exciting. The mail is that the full forward's not playing.
So Darcy Fogarty out. I was just going to say, according to 9 News over in Adelaide, he's got a knee injury. He will not be playing. So that's a big out.
Hodgie, what's more important? When I say I've got more faith in Adelaide, I've got more faith in their game style, their effort, and their ferocity to get the footy back. Whereas Port Adelaide got the talent and the upside. Adelaide's upside isn't as big, but they're going to bring the effort.
Well, I think when it comes to those games, and you know more than what we do, Kane, about the Showdown over there, how important that is. I think that's going to bring the best out of Port Adelaide. You got to look at who they played on the weekend. They didn't go away and play a bottom 4 team. They played a team that finished in the prelim last year, who was convincingly won the first round. So I believe it would be Port Adelaide just because of the importance of the game. And as you said, both coaches are going to be under pressure, whoever loses. But I think Port Adelaide will be strong enough.
Phil Thorpe's a pretty handy inclusion to replace Fogarty.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with him. I've got a lot of confidence in him.
Going to be a really good player.
Bought a lot of stock in him.
Why would they
early.
start him sub?
I don't know.
Because
they dropped Butts, which was interesting because he was their best key defender last year. They got an injury early with the concussion to Parnell, and then Phil Thorpe's got to come on. They've already got Himmelberg, Fogarty, Walker in the forward line. So that was a bizarre one for me.
It was a strange one. I thought both sides that played in the sauna up in Sydney, GWS and the Crows, would struggle, but the Crows struggled early and then fought back late.
Observation number 4, John Noble is the best value for money player in the AFL. Let me explain. 2019 mid-year pickup, played every game last year, signed a 2-year contract extension. I reckon he'd be under the average wage. I'm guessing here. I reckon he'd be a $300,000 player, John Noble. I reckon he's worth 5. So they say
He's in great form.
They say in American sport that the best value you can have in the NFL is a quarterback on a rookie contract, because for 5 years the wage is set for the quarterbacks. Now, when that expires, you have to pay them $500 million if they're any good, like Mahomes, which means you can't spend money on the offensive line, the defensive line, every other position. It's the same with Collingwood, because you've got such a bonus with Noble on 300, and I'm guessing, you essentially get another half a good player in your salary cap because he's taking up a spot. So I just thought he was worthy of recognition. We're all going to talk about Daicos and everyone else at Collingwood. He's one player that is in ripping form.
He is.
He's in ripping form.
I don't reckon he'll be on that much, Kane.
You don't reckon he'll be on 300?
I don't think. I'm saying I agree with him. The fact that how important he is and what he's been able to do. He came in at a mid-season draft. He will do anything to hold on to his contract, and their salary cap was exploding last year. So I'm saying it's probably even more value for him because he's probably getting unders.
All right, observation number 4A, Gerard. Will Hayward isn't getting talked about enough. Now, he's a South Australian. Both clubs should have picked him in the draft. I think they had the opportunity to do so, they didn't. And if I'm those clubs, Port of the Crows, I'm calling his manager this week and I'm putting a massive offer to him, because some of the stuff he's doing, he's elite defensively. His tackling yesterday was extraordinary. He's great in the air. He's really good at ground level, and he's part of this Sydney core of young players that play well, but he's been overlooked for whatever reason, and we need to start talking about him enough. So anytime anyone listening watches a Sydney game, keep an eye on Will Hayward and the stuff he's doing, because he's a very, very good footballer.
So you picked up Jordan Dawson. He's now captain, and now you're trying to unravel.
I reckon.
The Swans going for Hayward.
Trying to take this.
Kane, they rate him highly
Do
over
they?
there. Internally,
I'm glad.
Just because the media hasn't noticed him as much because he's outside the footy bubble up there, they rate him highly over at Sydney Swans.
I'm happy to hear that, Hodgie. Observation number 5.
No, 4B. You said 4A.
No, I've got no 4B.
Okay.
I've moved on to number 5. Never underestimate the power of a good pre-season. And even the best players and future Hall of Famers like Tom Hawkins can't get away with not doing one.
I'm so glad you mentioned this.
He looks awful.
So did they bite the bullet?
Isn't he got a calf muscle?
He's got a corky in the calf.
He got a corky in the
as well.
calf, but we know he's coming in off the back of the almost non-existent match practice. Well, was non-existent match practice with the foot. So Kane, Hodgie, Gerard, as people have played the game, do they bite the bullet and send him away for it like they did with Paddy Dangerfield, just for a mini pre-season? Can you possibly get up to speed on the fly, like seemingly they're trying to do?
What do you
at the
reckon,
moment?
Hodgie? Can you play yourself into fitness?
No, not at the age. A young person and an older person needs a strong pre-season. If you've had 5 or 6 strong pre-seasons and you're 25 to 28, you could probably get away with an interrupted one. As you get older and the game's a lot faster, you struggle to keep up as it is. So the only thing with Geelong, it's a hard one, because if Cameron played through a lot of pain on Thursday night. If he's not going to play, who's their forward? They've got Radaglia, who was the backup, who's now playing
Henry's out.
an unbelievable role across half-back. Henry's out. You're almost sitting there going, Hawk, we know you need some fitness. We know you need some time off. But for the team, you're going to have to play.
It's a challenging game coming up for them against the Suns. Well, I'd be interested to hear what Hoyney's got to say, what the numbers say.
I'm glad you mentioned the Suns, because observation number 6, is anyone ever going to stand up for that footy club? And I'm looking at the players here. So scores dead level at three-quarter time. Dead level. I'm okay, right, this is perfect. Who's going to make a name for themselves for Gold Coast? Do a Joel Selwood, do a Luke Hodge, and will your team over the line? Here's the numbers in the last quarter after it was even at half-time. Lose the ground ball by 5, lose the clearances by 4, lose the tackles by 9, allow 20 entries and 11 scores in the last quarter against a team that you thought you were better than coming into the season. So took Miller tick. I thought Matt Rao was one of the better games I've seen him play in a long time, and I've been
Had 2 good games.
the cheer squad have been hard on Matt Rao, and it's because I think he's got more capabilities than what he's shown. But I thought he was excellent. Apart from that, who was willing to dig in the last quarter? I didn't see many Gold Coast players.
No, it was a disappointing loss, and a great tribute to Essendon. They did the reverse. I know that Mark Evans said they got all the pieces in place for a premiership, and he's, even if you take the positivity out of a pre-season and you take that with a grain of salt, I think they are still well short through the middle of the ground. If you look at their options, their second wave of midfielders, I'm not sure who that is. So they keep relying on the same 3 or 4. Anderson's had a terrific season last year. Matty Rao's improving, been really good this year. The captain has been fantastic. But give me, to compete at the top end, you need 15. You need 12 at least. I mean, Collingwood could put 18 players almost through the midfield, Hodgie. So if you look what Brisbane did up the road, they've got a midfield that got them to the second semi-final, and they added 2 A-graders. I mean, one's a kid, but he's going to be an A-grader. They added a 2. So they've got probably 8 or 9 that could go through there. They've got one that's sitting in the sheds that can't get a game. And the Suns are well short in this area, and I don't think they've sort of acknowledged it and recruited for it.
Unfortunately, it's a consistent theme with Gold Coast. Every year since I've been up here, like, their list is coming together. King had injuries last year, but they got the Rao, the Andersons, the Tuke Miller, Weller. They got all these guys that are slowly starting to come into the part of their career where they're going to have an impact. But it gets the games like that. And if you look at their 3 games that we've watched, GWS, they were no fight. That wasn't a very good game for Gold Coast at all. The Sydney game, no fight. And then, as you said, Kane, the time where it was push and shove, they had the lead against Essendon. Essendon had the will to win that game. They had the players to push past them and wanted to win. And Gold Coast, in the 3 outings that we've been able to watch this year, you're not walking away going, have they learned anything? The one person who fought for them, he left, went to Geelong and retired. He's the only person who I've seen who's consistently would fight to try and win or save a game.
On observation number 7, there's a couple of veterans in trouble. I've mentioned my concerns about Trent Cotchin. I'm not going to mention him here. But Dyson Heppel and Rory Sloane are in a bit of trouble. I think Heppel was subbed out. His ball use was poor. He was clearly upset to be subbed out.
Well, I think he was shocked, wasn't he?
I think it was the right call, though.
He was like, me? You talking about me? Off?
It was a good call. I thought that was, once again, I could have put that in Brad Scott's coaching. That was a good call.
And explained away under the guise of short break. And I hope Dyson was watching the Richmond game where Dustin Martin was subbed off. So that's how he danced around the question.
In saying that, you got to feel for a player who gets thrown the bib without getting told. There should have been a coach on the bench say, hey, mate, we're looking to do this with the side. Well, we've got a short break. We might bring you off, put on a young fella for a bit of run. You explain that to a senior player, and he's like, yep, no problems. And I know Heppel would take it like that. When you just get thrown the bib by a trainer, you're like, hang on, what? Where's the communication?
Got Good
so
point.
I feel for that. I feel a little bit harsh. And with the Cochin, I've got a move that might help him find some form or have impact.
Well,
with his,
we got
with his
time,
side.
Hodgie. Well, explain. Where?
Nick Daicos, defensive forward this week.
You think he can go with him?
Well, what I'm saying is there's a smart bloke who's disciplined and who knows who can find the footy. I'm saying leg speed wise won't be able to, but at times if you're Nick Daicos and you're going against a Trent Cochin who isn't going to go through the midfield, they've got Taranto, they've got Hopper, they've got Bolton, they've got all these other guys who are going to go through, they're phasing him out. He can play a serious role for them by, I know playing off a half back line getting tagged, it's not about him getting 20 and you getting 20. All he has to do is limit him to 12, 13, 15 touches. And if Koch kicks a goal, they look at that as an even. So I'd be saying there's a role for him to play down there, limit their most attacking, best kick in the game, and see if he can add value that way to their side.
Is the discussion about, so the two options, Gerard and Hodgie and Sammy, is do you go defensive like that? And Ryan Clark, the Clarksman from Sydney, did a good job on Nick Daicos last year. Or do you go, let's put Bolton on him? And if you want to stand off the back of the square, you can do that. And if you want to play as an extra midfielder off the half back and have no regard for your opponent, well, we got one of the most dangerous half forwards.
Doesn't he just let someone else take? He just looks behind at his mate and says, "Someone else pick this guy up. I'm off."
But then just load up, put the other one as Rioli, and then you got some questions to ask if he wants to continue to run off. And
Nick's 12 months older or 6 months older, but Ryan Clark did a pretty good job on him in the last couple of games. Yeah. So that'll be their first starting option, but he's also learnt. He's going to he's manning up on another half forward flanker and trying to get himself some coverage that way, and he's running hard. And whilst Collingwood are winning the ball, he's going to remain dangerous.
Yep. And just observation number 7A while we're talking about Nick Daicos. Has anyone ever seen him go to ground? This morning I sort of said to Bucks, I've seen vision of Lee Matthews, and he's the closest thing that I've seen in the way that he's got the big backside and the smaller torso and his
low
ability.
centre of gravity.
Yeah, that.
That's inherent in the family.
Yeah, so I'm not comparing him saying he's going to be Lee Matthews, a different type of player, but the similarities between the way they move and the way that they hold their feet, it's uncanny, I reckon.
Yeah, well, he doesn't go to ground. It's a good observation, Kane.
But Hawthorn, just by the way, that final practice match, obviously down in Launceston, that was the one that thought maybe he could be got at in a tagging sense because Finn McGuinness got a real hold of him down there. But Lockie Jones lasted, what, 3/4 of a quarter?
Lockie Jones, is he a tagger though?
It was a strange choice.
Yeah.
See, I would have gone the other way. I would have gone with Junior Rioli or Fantasia and just put them in the vicinity and
try and do damage that way.
Try and do damage the other way. We've got Luke Hodge in the studio. Got your calls as well. If you want to jump on the Harcourts open line, you can do that now.
Hodgie, it's a big grudge match. It's going to be built up. North Melbourne v Hawthorn down in Tasmania. You've already tipped Hawthorn, which is, tell me why they're going to unravel the Kangaroos, who have started magnificently well.
I think it's as much as both coaches are going to say it's about the side and it's about us getting another win. North Melbourne going 3-0. It's definitely personal for both coaches. Obviously, Clarko didn't leave Hawthorn on the best terms, and Mitch came in and obviously replaced him. So I feel that's going to be entertaining just in itself on two coaches trying to out-coach each other. But on the flip side, I feel that Hawthorn comfortable travelling down to Tasmania. It's not different for them.
So is North, though. Is North comfortable?
Yes, but everyone's expecting North to win. I'm saying the reason why I reckon Hawthorn is because they're going to come back. They've got something to prove.
Yep.
Their last two performances haven't been great, and it'll be a target. North are sitting back going, "Hey, we're going right here. We won the first one. We went over to Fremantle. We're 2-0. No one thought we'd be here. So they're now looking at how good we can be, and is that discipline side of things still going to be there? Because I know that Hawthorn, and you could tell by Mitch's disappointment in the press conference after the game, that a lot of the efforts that was there, but it was almost a polish, and he'll be making sure that they're switched on for this weekend because of who they're playing as well.
As an early tip, Sam, are you supporting Hodgie here?
Yep, I am. Yep. I'm just keen to ask him, though. You know both men, Hodgie. Would it become personal for one or both of them this particular game?
One thing I've found out over the years is whenever a coach coaches against his old team, whether he was a player, whether he was an assistant, or coached against someone who they were close with, it's always personal. They want to get the bragging rights. Even if you look at Fags versus Hawthorn, when Fags come up there and I was still playing at Hawthorn, you just see how much Fags wanted to beat Hawthorn because that's where he come from. It's a natural instinct. If you talk to any coach and they say, no, it's not, they're lying to your face.
Will they speak this? Do you reckon they'll speak this week?
That would be a shake of hands or a hi if they cross paths. I wouldn't be surprised if there's no crossing of paths between the two of them.
So
they might be taking the long way around to the coach's box.
One's flying Virgin, the other Qantas, or is one sailing down there?
Oh, Spirit.
Separate flights for sure. I wouldn't be. If I was the AFL, I wouldn't be putting joint flights for both teams.
What do you make of the Western Bulldogs, Hodge, and where they're at?
Look, they have been disappointing from what we've seen for who they brought in, and I just think it's because everyone has high expectations. They have started slow, but they made the grand final 2 years ago, and their best football, they can match it with some of the best. But unfortunately, what we've seen, and I'm not sure if we're taking something away from Ross and what he's brought into the St Kilda Football Club, but they were out-hunted, they were outplayed on the weekend. And with the quality of blokes that the Bulldogs still have in their list, I know a lot of people scratching their head going, they couldn't be outplayed as much as what they did on the weekend.
How exciting are the two youngsters three youngsters for St Kilda at the present time? They're terrific young players.
Philippo,
Owens, yeah,
and Caminiti.
Caminiti is the one who's just come from nowhere. I mean, once Steve Silvani moves out of the talent ID, his son should just move straight in because he's one from one at this. That's 100% record. Caminiti is he was superb again and looks dangerous and infectious.
And what about Cordy turning back the clock? Well, not even because he's never played there before. So the makeshift forward setup that he's got has been genius. I wonder whether it's sustainable. Hodgie, do you think it is?
Well, I think if Ross can continue to do what he's doing, I was probably one to put my hand up and say, I think Ross has gone back to the old school defensive style. So as a forward for St Kilda, I wouldn't want to play there. You'd need to be a magician like Rewald or a hard worker like to get the results. But how he sets up around the stoppage to squeeze blokes up. So if they do lose, they've got extra numbers to win it back. Or if they do win it, they squeeze the numbers up. So if the opposition win the ball, they've got to go through the whole 18. He's not playing Russian roulette. It's a very defensive style. But when they're winning the ball, they're trapping the opposition in. They're not giving them no room to move. So, look, as much as I thought Ross's games were going to be like they were last week with a high of 60 and a low of 50, I was clearly wrong on the weekend from the offensive barrage that they had going at the Bulldogs' defence this week.
Hodgie, we'll do one more before we say goodbye to Kane. But, Sam, I want to know what Hodgie thinks about the Nathan Broad tackle and what he should get. What do you think he will get?
4 minimum.
So 4 minimum is where do you think? Hodgie, is that right?
Yeah, I'd say it'd be at least 4 because of everything we've spoken about, because of the articles we've had the last few weeks, because of what all past players, the ones that we got up and we used to watch as kids, and now they're coming out with all their troubles because of how dangerous our game has been.
Should it be increased? I mean, because that's probably what the matrix is going to throw up. Should it be 6?
Well, it's hard to say. Depending on what's gone on in the past, I'd say it'd be a 4, possibly 5. Unless they want to put more on it because of what we've seen the last few months. But that was a one where he's pinned an arm. It was near the boundary line. You could have simply just rolled over the boundary line, but pinned the arm, and it was a pick up and dump.
He's tiny too. He's vulnerable. He would have 10 kilos on him.
Because I think the AFL need to come out and
Broad's a strong boy. Broad's not massive, but he's a strong boy, Broad. So.
What do you think, Gerard, after
Well, I just think Tom Stewart, he got 4,
and
the AFL need to come out and address that because the next bloke needs to get more than 4 because 2 blokes who didn't cause any harm, well, one of them got 3.